myself. So with you all. Enjoy the curls, enjoy the lighting, enjoy the editing. Just kidding. I am a DEI practitioner and a human resources expert, and I work with companies to sort of create more equitable outcomes for all employees. So now I'm in the corporate space, but I think the part of my identity or the part of my history that I enjoy talking the most about is my time as a Hostos student ambassador. I was part of the original gang, the original group of DEI ambassadors to sort of kickstart this project in this community that you are all a part of. And so I just want to right off the bat let you know that you are part of an incredible community that cares about the broader world, that cares about equity, that cares about service leadership. And it's just a really good time for all of us to kind of gather together. By way of being in this space, you're sort of being welcomed into a broader DEI community. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in public housing. And I experienced the not so great inequities in income in the public school system. And once I became an adult and I understood and I had the language with which to describe my experience, I learned that these systems are not a mistake. These systems are designed to keep certain people in power and others not so much. And so if you're familiar with the term redlining and the way that cities are designed, you'll know that the higher your income is and the higher your taxes are, the more resources you have for your public spaces, for your housing, for your public schools and private schools, et cetera. And so I went off to establish a career in social justice and public service. After Hostos, I went on to work at the UN for about 3 years, working on access to education for women and girls. Then I worked locally in New York City government to address issues of education equity, economic mobility, rezonings, and then spent some time in the ed tech space working in education equity issues. And so all of this to say is that I've been working on social impact and equity in action for many years now, a little bit over 10 years. But it's always nice to kind of bring it back home where it all started, because I did get my first sort of push here at the Leadership Academy, where I was granted opportunities to explore my curiosities and the things that I cared about in the broader community. So if you haven't already done that, if you haven't already engaged in depth, I invite you to have a one-on-one chat with Jason and learn a little bit more about the ways that you can get involved in your local community. Because it can really create a definitive or a formative experience that can help shape your career. If there's one thing that the CUNY and the Hostos family in particular does offer, is just that human connection, which I think is absolutely invaluable. Right. I'm getting the check in the mail later, right, Felix? Cool, awesome. All right, so why are we here? I'd like to kind of invite you to use the chat to let me know, why are you here? Like, did someone pay you to be here? Are you forced to be here? What sparked interest in joining us in this space? Please use the chat. I'll go ahead and read off of those. Leighton, welcome. Jacksani, welcome. Gladys, hi. So in this moment, I hope you're all taking a second to type in the chat why you are here. If you are comfortable taking yourself off mute, please go ahead and do so. And as a prompt, I'll let you know that we will continue to kind of call on folks, and this will definitely be a dialogue, not so much me talking at you, but I really want to invite you into the mix. You're here, they're here to be inspired. Okay, I'm here to learn from you, says Elizabeth. Okay, well, we're here to learn together, Elizabeth, so I'm going to be learning from you as well. When you hear the word DEI, what inspired you to enter the space is the prompt. Survival skills. That's real. Okay. let's see. I'm here to, Felix says, I'm here to have a broader understanding of the topic at hand and to support the contribution of our Hostos alumni. Awesome. Zaina, since you're in this space, if you're able, are you willing to come off mute and read the paragraph on the screen for us? All right. If I can have a volunteer. Lennon, since I'm looking at your face, thank you so much. Are you willing to read the paragraph on the screen?
I can give it a try.
Thank you.
Yes. And I apologize for any background noise. I'm in the office.
Okay.
So DEI is rooted in social justice and the recognition that in order to have equitable outcomes for people of all backgrounds, we need to disrupt and redesign historical systems of oppression. DEI is the work of protecting human dignity. We are wired for community, and in order to thrive, we need to be able to embrace our uniqueness and that of others. DEI is about celebrating our differences and working together to remove the barriers that oppress or limit us from reaching our full potential.
Absolutely. And so DEI is an acknowledgement. Thank you so much for that, Lennon. DEI is an acknowledgement that the systems around us are not necessarily fair or just or equal. And so depending on where we come from and who we are, we will have a different experience on a day-to-day. We will have different access of power. We will have different amount of power. And for the purpose of shared language, I'd like to offer up a shared definition of power. And power is the ability to influence and make decisions that impact others. Privilege is advantages and benefits that individuals receive because of social groups they are perceived to be a part of. Privilege is often a result of systematic targeting and or marginalization of other social groups. In other words, for one group to be revered, another one needs to be oppressed. For one group to have power, systemically and historically, another group has been oppressed. DEI is an offspring of the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, where our leaders were fighting for racial justice. You saw it come through in the 15th and 16th Amendment, right? 14th and 15th Amendment. And now DEI is acknowledging our differences and our needs for access to power beyond race and ethnicity, but also to include gender identity, sex, ethnicity, religious backgrounds, membership in the LGBTQIA+ community, and so on. There's so many differences and dimensions of diversity that are all encompassing or that are encompassed in the DEI journey. And so the work is really about social justice, acknowledging the differences in access to power, dismantling those systems, and reimagining new ones. But before we can reimagine new ones, we need to acknowledge the injustice that does exist on a day-to-day. And so in this space, we are here for shared learning and shared understanding. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire says, education is either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which men and women deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. So today I hope to plant some seeds that encourage you to think about and to reimagine the future of your world. At the end of the session, you will know what DEI is, know the difference between equity and equality. These are words that are thrown about a lot. Be familiar with dimensions of diversity. Make a connection. We're here to build relationships. Build a greater awareness. I can't even get the word out. Build greater awareness around your biases and be able to name more inclusive behaviors. I'm going to pause there for any thoughts, reactions anyone may have. Feel free to come off mute. Cool. At any point during the presentation, if you feel the need to express a thought, feel free to come off mute. I'm very interruptible. Not in real life though, I get cranky, but in presentations, you're more than welcome to interrupt me. All right, we'll see you soon, Lennon. All right, norms and agreements. By virtue of staying in this space, here are the things that you're agreeing to. One, you're agreeing to keeping the lesson and leaving the story. That means that you will not share names of people in the space or comments that they've shared, but rather the impression that it's left on you. So confidentiality. You will remove distractions to the best of your ability. This is not a podcast. One mic, so we will not interrupt each other. I invite you to turn your camera on as you are able, except if you are driving, that is very dangerous. And I invite you to make mistakes here, right? Oftentimes folks are discouraged from having DEI conversations because they're afraid to say the wrong thing, to be offensive, to be offended. And this is a container, this is a safe space where we welcome folks to make mistakes. We are in community, right? I ask that you give grace. We're gonna make mistakes, and technology is never on my side. So y'all gonna see some glitches and y'all gonna roll with it, and we're gonna smile about it. I invite you to welcome joy, listen for understanding, lead with curiosity, let some beliefs die and welcome new ones. What I mean by that is you're gonna be challenged in the ways that you've thought about certain experiences. And I invite you to kind of reconsider what are the thoughts and beliefs that still serve you and what are the ones that you need to let go of. I invite you to lean into discomfort and engage fully. That means responding, interacting with folks. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be using breakout groups and we are going to be connecting with one another. So please keep that in mind. Feel free to grab a beverage, grab a notepad, whatever you need in order to be fully present in the space. Cool. So by use of your reaction button, can I see a thumbs up if you agree to the norms? Cool, thank you, Felix. And Felix, since you're on my screen, do you mind going ahead and read this paragraph from Dr. Love?
Sure. All members of society play a role in keeping this equal system in place, whether the system works to their benefit or to their disadvantage. Through the socialization process, every member of society learns the attitudes, language, and skills necessary to function effectively in the existing society. This socialization prepares individuals to play roles of dominant or subordinate in systems of oppression. Dr. Barbara Love.
Thank you. That is a radio voice if I've ever heard one. Thank you so much. Dr. Love is a social justice warrior. She's an academic, she's a thought leader in the DEI space, and someone that is essentially saying we are all participants in upholding or disrupting systems of oppression. She's someone that deeply inspires me, and I want to introduce you to her today. At the end of the session, you will all receive a copy of, what is the term that I'm looking for? A copy of excerpts from some of her writings. Any reactions to Dr. Love's language? Estelle. Inspiring, says Emerlyn. Thank you for that. I hope you're still parked. Thoughts and reactions. Jose Gonzalez entering the space. Cool. So throughout our time together, I want you to continue to think, what is your role, right, in society? How have you been socialized? Where are you holding privilege, right? Where are you part of dominant culture? Where are you feeling included? Where do you hold power, right? And where do you feel like you don't? And that changes throughout our lifetime and depending on which spaces we occupy. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are words that we hear a lot about, like we hear a lot, especially these days after the murder of George Floyd. But as I mentioned, This is not new work. This is work that was birthed from the civil rights movement. But now I think the reason why we're hearing so much about it is because social justice movements have created so much pressure culturally that it transcends just the civic space. You will see it in corporate spaces, which is where I work, right? Because companies are also learning that they cannot continue to operate in the ways that they have been. For some companies, they were learning that it's also very financially smart to ensure that the people that they work with are from different backgrounds, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is to include the countless dimensions of our human difference, all the things that make up our personality, the way that we are, who we are, our abilities, right? We're gonna learn a little more about what that is. Equity is an action word. Equity is about acknowledging the systems that exist that may be oppressive and doing something about them, right? Inclusion is ensuring that we are accepted, that we are part of the space, that we're empowered, right? That we can show up as our full selves. And belonging is a feeling. Belonging is a feeling that you are part of something. And so as cheesy as it is, right? They always use this analogy to describe it. I'll share it again. Diversity is inviting me to the party. Equity is ensuring that I can get there. Inclusion is inviting me to dance, but belonging is letting me pick the music. And these are our dimensions of diversity, right? Now I'll frame this by stating that this diversity wheel is designed for a corporate space. And so we will kind of amend it to speak to your student experience. By dropping a 1 in the chat, how many of you are currently employed? If you're currently employed, just drop the number 1 in the chat. So Jason, I'm glad you're employed, okay. Okay, so quite a few of us are currently employed. Okay, wow. I know that life, working and going to school. Cool, so this will be applicable to you as well. Personality, right, or identity. Is made up of internal, external, organizational, and era dimensions of diversity. Internal speaks to things that are relatively fixed. As much as I would want to change my age in the backwards direction, I cannot do that. It'll change over time, which shows that it is fluid, right? But it's not something that I can take an action to modify, right? My national origin, I cannot change that, ethnicity, etc. These things are not fixed, right? But they're, for the most part, things I can't do anything about, right? And these are things that are usually visible. You can see parts of my identity, parts of my internal dimensions of diversity. Then there are external that sometimes have to do with our environment and our, the things around us. This is our socioeconomic status, our education, our interests. These things are not necessarily visible, right? But they're also not fixed. These are things that can change over time, right? I can change my geographic location if I have the means to do so, right? I can change my citizenship status. I can change how much education, depending on how much access I have, right? And so these are things that can change over time. They're not fixed, they're not permanent. And then there are organizational dimensions of diversity, and these take place in relationship, right? Or in community. So what major you have declared, what school year you're in, what school you're a part of, whether you go to private or public school. If you're in the workforce, what is your job title? How high are you in the totem pole, right? And I probably shouldn't use that term. Which work location? Are you union or are you management, right? These are all things that determine how much access or how much power, how much decision-making power you may have. And then era. This is something we're talking more frequently about now. Era has to do with historical events or just things of your time period that have impacted or shaped your worldview. We have, thank goodness, right? We've all survived COVID. That's like a big world event that has taken place during our era. We may know people who have survived world wars, right? Or have survived colonization. Way that people view the world. I want you to start thinking about the dimensions of your identity. And if you were to fill this wheel out for yourself, what would it look like? Drop a number 2 in the chat if you've seen this wheel before. Cool, so no one's seen the diversity wheel before. Oh, Leighton, you have, awesome. Is there anything you would like to add, Leighton, to what I have shared? And if I haven't pronounced your name correctly, please correct me.
No, that's how you say my name. The wheel is perfectly fine. You have internal, external, and organizational, and the error explains the time we're in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Cool stuff. All right. So we are Selah. That just means rest, pause, and reflect. We're going to break out now, and I'm going to put you into pairs, technology allowing. And I want you to think about these questions. What part of your identity affects your day-to-day most? How does your identity affect the way that you behave at school or at home? All right. With the power of technology, these things should be opening. Please bear with us. Jason, can you kick off our breakout rooms? They're not launching for me. Welcome back. Welcome, Estelle, Daima, Felix. Hi, Jose. Welcome back. Carla, Annie. Welcome, everyone. And Sumana, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, welcome, welcome, everyone. Casey, hi. Joelle. Yahani or Yaxani. Welcome, everyone. Well, how was that? I'd like to hear from 2 to 3 people, just what are some of the things that came up in small groups or pairs? What were some of the things that stood out to you? I just kind of want to get a sense of what was taking place in these spaces. Feel free to come off mute, and as you feel comfortable, please share a little bit about what you heard and what took place in your spaces.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I can go if you don't mind.
Please do.
Yeah, so this activity was really it gave me the time to reflect a little bit about myself, and what I found out was that even though I might deny it, I am a reflection of my parents and my history. That shapes a lot of my identity. I might not think so or might not want to, but I feel like I'm just like my parents. And I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing for me because I take a lot of pride in my parents. They're people who raised me and I love them very much. And I'm proud to say I'm a reflection of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting, like when we finally take a moment to pause and think about the parts of our identity that are similar to those around us, right? And how we've been shaped. Who else?
Yeah, I would like to go. I was with Mr. Felix from the alumni, Hostos alumni department. It was like an absolute pleasure speaking with him in the breakout room. One of the, things to be shared for me as part of my identity that affects my life most I shared was like my religion and being Muslim. And one of the key tenets of the religion being like, being merciful and kind and to people around us. There's this famous saying of the prophet says like be merciful to those people who are on earth, and then the one in the heavens would be merciful to you. So just like a key principle that I, like most people around the world, go by. We believe in like giving, and in giving, we also in turn become receivers of the same good that we disseminate. So yeah, that is what I would like to share. And so this is like sort of what affects the way I am at home or at school. I like to be at least on the giving part, in service. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what I'm hearing you say is also that your faith is one of the key drivers of how you show up on a day-to-day, right? That's beautiful. Thank you. I'd like to hear from one or two more people.
I would like to talk. I was with Jose as well, and our reflection of how our identity is with a lot with our parents as well.
Mhm.
I feel the same way, where a lot of my identity comes from my father, and it's still stuck with me. And the great thing about it is it's a good identity to have it, where I know certain aspects are great for it, but knowing as well that I caught a few of his aspects and a few of his traits which aren't as positive is another great thing that caused me to reflect on myself. The way that affects for me in school and at home, really, it makes me reflect a lot when I know either an anger issue comes upon or something like that, where it's an identity of, oh, this isn't really me. This is like that little part of me learning from my parents. But the great thing about it is I'm a great motivator. I'm always there. I'm the leader with everybody. And that's another part of my identity that I know I very much appreciate and that I can carry out from home to school and to school to home and bring it back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting to see just generationally, right, the types of behaviors that we adopt, that we learn, right, through socialization or through raising, that then carry out into the ways that we engage with people in the workplace or people in social settings or at school. And the beautiful thing about it is once there is awareness, you can decide, are these behaviors, traits, right, things that I can, that serve me, right? Are these things that I want to continue? Or is this something that I would want to change or evolve? And these are parts of our external dimensions of diversity, right? That aren't necessarily fixed. They're fluid. Someone else, please. Cool. Well, I'll share a little bit. I think one of the parts of my identity that I can't necessarily change, right, are my sex and gender at the moment, right? Like I grew up being conditioned or socialized to believe that because I was a girl, there are certain behaviors that were not accessible to me. There were certain games that were meant for boys, right? And so I wasn't supposed to play video games. In the workplace, I've often been one of, right, or the only woman in certain spaces, which leaves me feeling, do I really belong here, right? In many instances, I've been the only person from a Latino background or from a lower socioeconomic background. I remember when I graduated Hostos and then attended Hunter, I got my first like big girl job at the UN, and I was the youngest person in the room. I was the only New Yorker because everybody was from all parts of the world. And I hadn't even graduated yet, so I didn't have a degree. And everyone around me spoke multiple languages and had these like Ivy League degrees. And it was really intimidating for me because I didn't know whether or not I belonged. I didn't know what exactly I was contributing to the space. And what I was contributing now looking back were my own unique experiences. Sometimes we're one of in many spaces, but that should be empowering, right? Where we are uniquely positioned to serve and lead in these moments. And it's important to have a surrounding network and a supportive system, right? That enables us and empowers us to show up as our full authentic self. And so the things that I thought were hindrances once upon a time, I now understand were things that uniquely positioned me to lead and uniquely empowered me to serve, right? And so as you think about your experience at school or work, I want you to pay attention to who are the people in power, who are the people in senior leader positions, is there diversity in age? Is there diversity in race, ethnic background? Is there diversity in physical ability, right? I want you to consider these things so that you can make a mental note of who is in the room and who is missing from the conversation. True diversity is only accomplished when all different perspectives are included, right? Thank y'all for that conversation. We're gonna move on to equity. And the visual that you see here is an image that hopefully conveys what is the big difference between equality and equity. And so equality, you'll hear a lot of organizations and branding that speaks about equality. And that's a word that really triggers me because that is not necessarily what we need, right? What we need is not necessarily that everybody gets the same thing, right? You'll see the top image where every single person got the same bike. That would be equality, right? And equality does not lead to the same outcomes for everyone. You'll see the person with a disability is unable to ride that medium-sized bike. You'll see the tall gentleman is able to ride it, but it's very uncomfortable on his back. His posture is not great. He's gonna develop some hip issues for sure. And then you see the medium-sized woman that is able to ride the bike comfortably. You see the child on the bike and the bike is just too big for him. And so equity, which you'll see in the lower part of the image, is when folks are given what they need in order to have an equitable experience, right? And so that the outcome is equitable, the impact is equitable. The impact or the outcome that we want is for folks to have a pleasurable bike riding experience. So you see that the woman with the disability has now levers, right? So this handheld bike or hand manipulated bike that she can ride comfortably. You see the taller gentleman has a bigger bike for his larger frame. The medium-sized woman has a bike that suits her, and the child is accommodated with the bike that suits his needs. So as you think about your school experience, as you think about your relationships, as you think about the workplace, I want you to be mindful of what are the things that are unique to you? What are the things that would make your experience that much more meaningful? What are the things that would enable you to be successful? I was later in life diagnosed with ADHD, which is very common for women to be diagnosed later on in life. And what that meant, or the way that it shows up for me, is that I'm very fidgety. You'll notice that I'm standing. I have a standing desk as part of an accommodation because it allows me to feel grounded and it allows me to be somewhat still. I could not sit on a chair for very long periods of time. I also have a lower back injury, which makes it very hard for me to sit for long periods of time. The standing table, their standing desk, enables me to perform to the best of my ability, right? Sometimes whenever I am asked to complete an assignment, I need to have it written in front of me in advance so I could review it, right? That helps me focus and receive information. If I'm being asked a question, I often can't engage in real time, right? I need to take a moment, go think about it, and then re-engage. So I call it my lag, which I think is totally fine. But these are the things that make me different. And if I'm in a community where I feel empowered and safe to speak out about my differences, I'm more likely to be accommodated, right? And that's why safety in these spaces is so important, so that you can say and name the things that you need. I'm going to pause there for any reactions that you may have as you think about your own unique needs. Cool. By a show of thumbs, do you think we got the difference between equality and equity? Type a number 1 in the chat if you still need more clarity. Okay. Excellent. All right.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so that's a very unique approach. I mean, a lot of the times when we're asking for something, we want the same thing as the other person, but we don't take into consideration that at times we may need something different than what the other person has to be able to do the same. So this is very unique and a good way of looking at things.
Good. I'm glad it's helpful. Absolutely, right? Sometimes it's not about just getting the same thing as our neighbor. And you know what? That's advice for life, right? Let's kill the comparison spirit right here today when we see that our friends are in one stage of life or doing one thing at their job. Our lives are unique and we need different things, and our experiences are going to be different as well. It's me preaching to myself. Let's see. Diana says, I appreciate for bringing the difference up, since many believe that we all get the same thing, but in reality, we need the things to our limit. Yeah, we need different things. When I first started in the public school system, I did not speak a lick of English. And so I needed a dual lingual experience. And I was an English as a second language student. It did not mean that I was less smart or less capable or that I had any cognitive impairment. It meant I speak a different language, right? And so being in a dual lingual class or English as a second language enabled me to learn the material in the language that I spoke as I slowly learned English. Jose says, yeah, it's at times used as a basis for comparison. We're all unique and not everything works the same for everyone. That's right. And so as you start, to think about your work experience, I want you to think about what are the things that you need in order to be successful in the workplace, right? Whether it's your benefits, whether it's accommodation, pay, right? Flexibility with your schedule. What are the things that you believe you would need in order to thrive at work? Is it development, right? Is it more access to exposure to different roles, to learning opportunities? And the thing about that is that only you know the answer to that, right? Inclusion, that's all of us at the party with the playlist we all created. Diversity without inclusion, I want to make a very clear point that diversity without inclusion is incomplete. We see a lot of organizations talking about diversifying the face of leadership or bringing people from diverse backgrounds. What they really mean is we need to now hire, promote, and elevate BIPOC folks, people from underserved communities, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, LGBTQ+ communities, because they're realizing that in a lot of organizations, and the data shows that the majority of leadership positions across industries are held by white men, right? And so the culture that is dominant in a lot of these spaces is white centered. And so what's happening at this moment is that folks are acknowledging this, companies are acknowledging this, and they're being very intentional about hiring folks from diverse background, racially, ethnically diverse backgrounds. But once we're in these spaces, these environments that weren't necessarily built for us, we don't feel comfortable, we don't feel at ease, and we leave. And you'll notice a trend that a lot of organizations have a challenge with retention, and that keeps me employed. Because I tell them, this, you know, all I do is dance around with the same message over and over. Retention is not about redesigning a job description. Retention is about redesigning the environment so that people from diverse backgrounds feel included and are also holding power to shift the environment. We don't want to bring people in to sort of fit into a culture that already exists. Inclusion is about being welcomed and being part of shifting that culture, right? We talked about earlier being the difference between being invited to the party and then being asked to dance. Inclusion is about the things that need to be true so that I can be added, so that my songs can be added to the playlist, so that I feel that I'm part of this community, that I'm respected, that I'm cared for, that you're investing in me. And this is true in the workplace, but this is also true in your personal relationships. You know, humans need to feel that they belong. Humans want to be part of something. This is why football teams are so successful, or just sports teams in general. This is why you see sororities are almost, you know, they behave as families later on in life. And it's because they have sort of mastered this feeling for people that they belong to something. And I will say that that's what Hostos did for me, or that's what the Leadership Academy did for me. That's why so many years later, I continue to come back, because we figured out what inclusion looks like. And inclusion looked like acceptance of one another and celebrating one another and welcoming and embracing one another in word and action. Has there ever been a time where you did not feel included in a space? I'm going to pose this question to the group. Ever been a time where you felt left out? Felix, I saw you nodding. Did a memory come to mind? Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Are you comfortable doing so?
Well, I remember a group of friends. I'm originally from Venezuela, and all my friends were from this specific country, which I won't mention. But I figured that they were talking in a way, and I felt excluded. And they were talking about, you know, different stuff that I wasn't understanding. So I don't know. I think that when it comes to especially when you're dealing with diversity and individuals that are not from your same race and background, you really, it's your responsibility. It's our responsibility in this case to make sure that that person feels included, that you look for a universal language that you know, it's going to make them feel part of the group, part of what's been, you know, the nature of the group. So yeah, it has happened to me at a couple of occasions. It has happened to me at work, but these are things that, I mean, you got to a point that you just ignore, you move forward with. But it should be better. It could be better. You know, it's something that I wish that we all could be more conscious about it.
And thank you for sharing that, and also sharing the mindset of, you know, these are things that just happen, right? We just kind of let it go. I want to share with you the language of microaggressions, and that is to mean the small ways in which we feel that we're kind of hurt or harmed or excluded, right, on a daily basis. And sometimes it can be as simple as speaking in a different language, right, so that the other person does not understand. That can be a microaggression. Sometimes it's the misspelling of your name when it's on your name tag and it's on your signature. It's all the small ways in which we're told we're not important, right? It's the let me touch your hair to a person of color who has textured hair. It's those moments where we know that because they're not part of our group, they don't necessarily see us. Those are microaggressions. And so I want to challenge the group to, when you experience microaggression or when you experience exclusion, to not think this is just the way that things are, right? But to acknowledge this is not fair, this is not okay. And in a moment of pausing, or Sela, then decide if you want to address it. We also, if we want to stay after the session to talk about how to disrupt microaggressions or how to disrupt these moments, happy to do so. But we encourage folks to give feedback and have difficult conversations so that we can kind of call people in and make them aware of the ways that they're being offensive and harmful, because these things build up over time. And we cannot afford to continue to allow ourselves to be hurt and harmed, right? Because these things affect our mental health and well-being. Black and Brown communities report a disproportionate number of depression in comparison to other communities, and anxiety. We have higher call-out dates in corporate America. We have higher churn, or like we'll quit a job. It has nothing to do with performance. These are often high potential, high performing individuals who simply are tired of being mistreated in small and big ways.
Yissely, I believe Jose Gonzalez wants to ask a question.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so before I ask the question, I just want to say I'm all for diversity. I just want to pick your brain and see where, your head is at. I wanted to ask, because, whites, you mentioned whites make up a majority of leadership roles, right? But at the end of the day in this country, they are a majority. So isn't it kind of pointing back to the equity piece, it's also a matter of pure numbers, and it happens that they are the majority in most sectors. So I want to know, what do you think about that?
So numerically, globally, people of white race are not the majority. Black and Brown communities are the global majority. In terms of numbers, right? If we're talking about numbers, they're not representative of the communities that they operate in. When we talk about equity, a lot of these companies are trying to mirror the communities that they serve. And so in a global company, for example, it is impossible that the majority of the constituents, their customers, are white, right? Are all white. And so to have a leadership team of all white men is not reflective of their customer base. So I want you to think about it in ratios in that way. The other thing is that there are many historical factors that contribute to who has access to education, who has access to training, who has access to mentorship, and who has access to designing what the criteria is for these leadership positions are, right? And oftentimes those criteria exclude our particular skill set, right? Because the game, right, or the system wasn't necessarily designed with our particular intelligence in mind. And so when we talk about numbers of leaders or numbers of ethnically and racially diverse leaders, it is not a coincidence, and it is not simply because there is a numerical majority of white men that are capable of doing the job. That is the belief of many people who hold the position and hold the power to decide who gets the role. And that's why DEI exists, so that we can reimagine what qualified means, what a qualified candidate is, and what kind of leadership traits we want, right? But in any space, right, whether it's white, physically abled bodies, all women, all of a single thing, it is impossible that you are truly serving a population when you're in a room with people who look and think just like you. That is not diversity, right? And so if you're serving a diverse population and you're making decisions that affect people from diverse backgrounds, then you need people who can relate to them right? Because these policies, right? Think of our local government, think of our federal government. We need people who reflect us because they represent us, and they either create opportunities for us or they shut them out.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question? That was so good, Jose. Thank you. All right. Jason, I'm going to count on your magic one more time for our last breakout. You're going to have a few minutes, 10 minutes, to discuss in your pairs, what are some parts of yourself that you hide in work or school settings? What does that feel like? And if you could be your authentic self, what would that look like? Or what Dr. Love calls liberation? What would it feel like to just show up as yourself? Just putting it out there if it ever comes of interest. All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. Welcome back into the space. All right, how was that for everyone? I know it was a little glitchy with the tech, so we do apologize for that. But overall, I hope it was a positive experience and that you did have an opportunity to connect with someone here at Hostos. Oh, what a cool filter. I love it. Would anyone, I'd like to hear from one or two people, just what are some of the things that came up? We talk a lot. You know,
I guess I can go again. I don't mind going. So what came up in our group was that a lot of us, we do hide our fun part, our fun side. But you know, I mentioned that it's a matter of what your goals are, but I was told that, you guys should try to balance it. And it's something that is hard to do, but it's something that's manageable and I can always work on. So even though I may try to hide my loving side or trying to have fun with my classmates, I can still do that and get the work that I want to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear that. Yeah. Anyone else would like to share what came up during this session? You don't necessarily have to share what you said or what was said, but a reaction or reflection that you might have had. I see you, Naima.
Oh, look, if anybody's not going, I'll go. So I'm fine.
Powerful girl in the background. I see it. It brought me back.
That's her mood all the time when in school. That's why I have it. That's how I feel. But for me as a reflection, it's great to realize that a lot of us do hide a great amount of how we are at home. That, that we don't feel excluded, like it's just us. Like it's just me doing it, but it's others as well. And then it feels great to speak about it in general, that with people that we see on a good amount of time, where it's the actuality of, oh, this is how you are in school. Oh, but really you just want to chill. You want to be away. But it's a great reflection to know, to see that it is a balance that we need. And it's like I was saying before, we're all trees, we're meant to grow, we're all growing, we're seeds, like we're here for it.
Thank you so much for that. Would anyone else like to share?
So I'd like to share. Through our conversations, I just learned that there are a lot of things, within ourselves that we tend to hide, whether at school or at home. And what we don't realize is that some of these things are very, very detrimental to ourselves. They're doing more harm than we can even imagine. And it is only out of freedom and like liberty to just be your authentic self and, liberate yourself and just stand in your own truth and be yourself. And with that comes freedom, like you mentioned early on. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I could not have phrased it more beautifully or more perfectly. That is the gist of it, right? During the pandemic, many organizations were studying burnout. You might have heard that a lot, where people were like emotionally, physically, spiritually, creatively, just fatigued, exhausted, and just done, right? We were also conducting research on the mental well-being of our team members, and it was consistently declining. And we found that one of the key contributors to burnout in the workplace was a lack of inclusion, right? And part of that is due to the fact that people do not feel safe. I heard someone say that, there's certain things that I don't hide when I'm at home. Well, that's because it's a familiar, safe space that you believe belongs to you, right? Where you can just be yourself. And so there was a lack of safety in these workspaces, right? For people to just show up themselves. There's also this belief that I need to be a certain thing. I need to show up a certain way. I need to speak a particular way in order to fit into this culture that already exists, right? And that creates such a detrimental effect on our well-being and our health. And ultimately, this work is about caring for people, right? So thank you so much for naming that. The phenomenon or the behavior that we're referring to, right, where we are sort of being anything other than ourselves in order to fit in, it's called masking. Some of us are familiar with the term code switching, right? But masking is hiding your authentic self in an effort to gain greater social acceptance, right? We want to belong, we want to fit in, we want to be cared for. The cost of camouflaging your personality and emotions can add up exponentially, causing you to experience a sense of loss, anxiety, and depression. This stuff can, at the risk of sounding dramatic, this stuff can kill you, right? And that's why we saw tons of we saw the height of suicide rates during the pandemic as well. So it's something to impress upon you. It's not to pose fear, but just to kind of let you know how much is at stake when you are withholding of yourself and how much harm you're causing to yourself, right? When you believe, or when the environment is telling you that you need to be anything other. And you don't need to be anything other, right? There's unique gifting in every single one of you. And if you are not given the opportunity to express that and explore that, the world does not get to see it, right? And benefit from it. And so we need your gifting. But there is also an acknowledgement that in order for you to put that out there, whether it's your humor, your love, your sense, whatever it is, you need to feel safety in a space. The other reason why we don't necessarily behave as our full selves is because we know that there may be assumptions that are made about us, right? We don't want to be judged. So we're going to kind of play this brief video on bias. And hopefully the audio cooperates.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Just don't trust.
She's a woman.
She's a
This is a
woman.
man's job. She's clearly not educated.
Hey, does she even speak English?
That's not me. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume? Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who turns for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
What was that? Blind spots, or a theme I'd like to kind of just quickly surface, is unconscious bias. Our brain is tasked with the main job of keeping us alive. And our brain sort of receives information in terms of, are we safe or are we not? And so sometimes our brain creates shortcuts, or oftentimes our brain creates shortcuts so that we don't have to continue to relearn the same patterns every day. Imagine learning to walk every day. Imagine learning to tie your shoes every single day. So in order to protect us, our brain creates these shortcuts, right? So that we don't have to relearn these things. And that's a positive example. But when we're speaking about unconscious bias, is the ways that we may group people in a particular category because you met one person once upon a time that had one thing in common with this person. And now we kind of make these generalizations. A lot of the time that I do spend with organizations is kind of pointing out these blind spots. The message that I want to leave you with today in terms of unconscious bias is that it's important to be in trusting relationships so that we can sharpen one another, so that you can call me in and say, hey, Yissely, that thing that you said was really offensive and did not take these parts of my experience into consideration. And I know that you're coming to me in love and in care because you want me to do better. And we're going to continue to make mistakes, right? And so in order to be less harmful to one another, we need to be able to be in community so that we can in trust, point out what some of these blind spots are. I want you to, on your own time, we won't have time for it today, take a few minutes to write out the names of the 10 people in your life who you trust the most, right? Be really thoughtful when you have to make a decision, when you need care, when you're grieving, when you need support. Who are these people? And I want you to list them out in no particular order. And then I want you to look through your list and see, are they different in age? Are they different in sex? Are they different in gender identity or gender expression? Are they all cisgendered? Are they all part of the same religion? Are they all related to me? I want you to view them through the lens of diversity and kind of do an internal audit of who is in your immediate community and how much you're embracing diversity. And this is not to cause any kind of shame or judgment, but rather to bring awareness to our own biases, right? I'm going to send Jason some resources to share with you all, a DEI glossary to get familiar with some terms that you may have already seen. Raven Solomon leads a weekly conversation called D.E.I, which is a bunch of DEI practitioners that have important conversations about the future of DEI, and it's just such a great learning space. Brown Enough is a podcast by a friend of mine named Chris Rivas, on the in-betweens of Black and white. He explores his own racial identity. And excerpts from Developing a Liberatory Consciousness by Dr. Barbara J. Love. If you'd like to stay in contact with me, you can scan the barcode above. That is my LinkedIn. That is my email address. Jason will also share with you. And before we go, I'm going to ask that you please complete a quick exit survey, just so that I can continue to learn from you and better understand your needs. Like I said, by virtue of being in the space, you are now part of the DEI community. You are now part of my learning journey, and we're here to support one another. So I'm going to stick around. If any of you have any questions, whether DEI or HR or Leadership Academy related, I'm happy to connect and answer any questions that you may have. And the survey is in the chat. Thank you all so much.
I apologize, Yissely. I don't know where you went. I hit a button.
They hear me, I think.
Okay.